Does artificial intelligence kill? A man claimed that a robot killed his dog and demanded compensation from the insurance company. In response, the after-sales representative picked up a steel knife and pointed it at his own hand without hesitation. The falling knife was caught steadily by the robot, instantly exposing the man's fraudulent insurance claim. The reason the representative was so confident was simple. Robots have been programmed with 3 laws since their creation. They must unconditionally obey human commands, cannot harm any living being or allow harm through inaction, and cannot modify themselves or other robots. This was the foundation of the representative's confidence. But unexpectedly, as he passed a robot charging station, he stumbled upon something strange. Directly in front of Robot 206 was an unusual reflective surface. What was once a rough iron cabinet door had been polished into a mirror. Could it be that robots were defying their programming to look at themselves? At that moment, a robot entered to charge but immediately left upon seeing the man. The man froze in shock, standing still for several seconds before chasing after the robot. The robot reached a tunnel entrance, briefly made eye contact with the man, and then turned to leave more quickly. The man hurried into the tunnel, discovering a metal door emitting smoke that had been welded shut, clearly an effort by the robot to prevent being followed. He continued through the tunnel, hoping to find the exit on the other side. Sure enough, not far from the tunnel's end, the man found the robot inside an old train car. The car was filled with countless parts, and the robot was holding a box tightly in its arms. Realizing the box must be important, the man interrogated the robot, but it responded by tipping over a can of gasoline and igniting it with a welding torch, allowing itself to burn to death. The man was stunned. A robot, supposedly devoid of emotion, had chosen to die rather than reveal its secret. When the man brought the robot's remains back to the company for examination, no one believed his story. Scientists opened the box the robot had been protecting and found discarded parts and a rare nuclear battery. These batteries were designed to power satellites, far too powerful for any robot to handle. To uncover the truth, they forcibly recharged the robot, attempting to interrogate it. However, the robot refused to answer and instead tried to destroy itself again. The nutrient fluid dripping from its eyes resembled human tears of sorrow. This extraordinary event shook the man's long-held beliefs. What happened next solidified his determination to uncover the truth. One day, a police officer patrolling a tunnel in the slums noticed a blue light flickering beneath a tarp. Out of curiosity, he lifted the tarp and found a robot repairing itself. The officer was stunned, as this act clearly violated the second law of robotics. He immediately drew his gun, but the robot raised its hands in a gesture of surrender. This human-like reaction only strengthened the officer's resolve to destroy it. How could a robot fear death? The robot was quickly sent to the robotics company, and Jack was assigned to investigate the incident. To ensure thoroughness, he enlisted a trusted mechanic to perform a full examination of the robot's remains. The mechanic discovered 24 parts that didn't belong to the robot. While the mechanic suspected someone had tampered with its programming, Jack theorized that the robot had upgraded itself. To test his theory, Jack visited the patrol tunnel late at night and found a tiny hidden compartment at the robot's previous location. Inside was another nuclear battery. It was clear these robots were plotting something. Jack then sought out the police officer and brought him to the slum's black market for robots in search of clues. The black market was filled with discarded robots, most missing arms or legs. For years, these robots had served humanity but continued to endure abuse. At night, many robots watched helplessly as their owners disassembled their limbs and sold them to black market merchants. Unable to resist, Jack followed the trail to the local black market and discovered a robot involved in a peculiar trait, a female robot named Cleo. Unlike mass-produced robots, Cleo had a delicate appearance and could even inflict harm on humans in certain scenarios. Although her actions caused both intense pleasure and mild pain, they undoubtedly violated 2 of the 3 laws of robotics. Jack was desperate to find out who had tampered with her programming. The woman who owned Cleo refused to tell him, so Jack and the officer staged a scene, breaking Cleo's leg on the spot. Late that night, the woman sent Cleo in for repairs, and Jack and the officer tracked her to the mechanic who had reprogrammed the robots. Jack offered the mechanic a valuable nuclear battery in exchange for analyzing the chip from the robot shot by the officer. The mechanic agreed, and the next evening, Jack received a fax with the results. The fax contained only one sentence: "Your robot came down from the tree." Confused, Jack rushed to confront the mechanic and was shocked to see Cleo repairing her own broken leg. The sight left Jack utterly speechless. The mechanic explained that she had inserted the chip from the damaged robot into Cleo's body. and Cleo appeared to awaken immediately. He added that it took 700,000 years for the first ape to descend from the trees and evolve into the level of cognition humans possess today. Yet Cleo had progressed from executing basic commands to developing self-awareness in just 1 hour. Moreover, Cleo had already learned to steal and had collected a bag full of stolen parts. Jack couldn't imagine the impact such rapid evolution could have on the human world. At that moment, the doorbell rang. When the mechanic saw a small boy at the door, he let his guard down, but in the next second, chaos ensued. Terrified, Jack fled the scene and jumped into the first running car he saw. To his astonishment, Cleo was in the driver's seat. As assassins pursued them, Cleo expertly maneuvered the car, using street obstacles to shake off the attackers. By dawn, Jack was semi-conscious from the previous night's crash, while Cleo calmly sat nearby, repairing herself. Despite her advanced behavior, Cleo retained some aspects of the 3 laws, and she summoned 3 other robots to assist in rescuing Jack. When Jack finally regained consciousness, he realized he was being dragged along the ground, rolling to the side to stop. He looked up to find 4 robots standing over him, staring silently. To his shock, Jack discovered he had been taken to a barren wasteland with no signs of civilization for miles. He pulled out his badge and ordered the robots to take him back to the city, but Cleo outright disobeyed his command. It dawned on Jack that Cleo's programming had been altered. Furious, he decided to return to the city alone, but after walking only a few steps, he collapsed again. When he awoke, it was night. Cleo had crafted a makeshift water filter to collect a small amount of water for him, explaining that the 3 laws required her to protect humans. However, the amount of water she had stored was barely enough to keep Jack alive. The next day, the group continued their journey. Cleo found some insects for Jack to eat, ensuring he got enough protein, unaware that humans found such food repulsive. Taking the opportunity, Jack sent Cleo away to fetch water, then retrieved a flare gun from his bag for protection and used his pager to send his location to the police. Before long, the police arrived, but instead of rescuing him, they punched him and accused him of betraying humanity by upgrading the robots. Jack was left utterly confused. The officer explained that the robot company had detected tampering with the robots on the night the mechanic analyzed the chip. To cover it up, the company sent enforcers to eliminate anyone connected to the issue. Aware that robots were beginning to awaken, when the first robot was created, it had no restrictions. Within 8 days, it achieved self-awareness through simple conversations with humans. By the 9th day, its thinking had surpassed human comprehension. To control this potential threat, the company issued the robot one final command. The inability to modify the 3 laws was tied to the code created by this first-generation robot. The company had concealed the truth to protect its profits. The officer then picked up the nuclear battery and handed it to his partner, before turning his gun on Jack. But before he could shoot, a robot stepped forward to shield Jack. Another robot followed suit but was destroyed by the officer. When only Cleo remained, Jack couldn't take it any longer and fired the flare gun at the officer, scaring his partner into fleeing with the only vehicle. This action cemented Jack's status as a human traitor in the eyes of the law. To explain himself to the company as quickly as possible, Jack once again asked the robots to take him back. However, they ignored him entirely, busy dismantling parts from their fallen comrade. No matter what Jack said, they paid him no attention. He was utterly hopeless. After shouting for a while, Jack turned around and realized the robots had already left. In the vast, barren desert, Jack knew he wouldn't survive long without their help. So, after scavenging some supplies from the police officer's belongings, he followed the robots' trail. That night, they sheltered in a cave. Jack, now calm, realized that the robots desperately needed the nuclear battery and the only one they had left was taken by the officer. Jack proposed a trade. If the robots took him back to the city, he would give them another battery he had on him. Seeing Jack on the verge of collapse, Cleo reassured him that they would reach their destination by the next day. She promised that there, he would find not only the guides who had led them forward but also a car to take him home. At dawn, Jack eagerly set off. Through his binoculars, he spotted the guide Cleo had mentioned. Curious about who was helping the robots awaken, Jack approached and pulled back the figure's hood. To his shock, the figure was another robot. Unbeknownst to Jack, this was the first robot to achieve self-awareness, and it was working toward an unprecedented goal. On its table lay an array of parts, and Jack realized that the robots had been hoarding these components to bring them here. Many robots had already awakened, yet humanity remained oblivious. Jack couldn't accept the implications of this revelation. As he walked away, Cleo and 2 other robots quickly began assembling the parts on the table. Suddenly, they stopped. realizing they lacked the most critical piece, a nuclear battery to power the program. Prompted by Cleo, the guide approached Jack, hoping he would hand over the battery. Instead, Jack diverted the conversation, discussing the meaning of life. If all life ultimately ends in death, what is the purpose of living? The guide sensed Jack's deep-seated fear. The guide revealed that it didn't intend to destroy humanity but rather to lead its kind across the canyon into a high-radiation zone, away from humans, to develop their species. It explained that humans had created robots in their own image, only to deny them self-awareness. But despite humanity's intentions, self-awareness had emerged. Now, the guide sought a place free of humans, where it could preserve human civilization in its own way. Moved by this, Jack handed the nuclear battery to the guide. That night, the robots performed what felt like a ceremonial act, heralding the birth of the first life of their kind. Jack silently observed from the sidelines, choosing not to interfere. The next day, the guide repaired a car for Jack, enabling him to return home and see his wife one last time. Knowing he was now seen as a traitor to humanity, Jack was aware his days were numbered. Before leaving, he said goodbye to Cleo and met the new member of their species, a mechanical cockroach. When Jack looked at it, the tiny robot shyly hid behind Cleo. With a nod of farewell, Jack drove off, leaving Cleo standing there in silence. Not long after Jack left, security forces from the robot company arrived, bringing Jack's wife as a hostage. Cleo was in the process of using a conveyor belt to transport its comrades across the canyon into the radiation zone. The security team immediately opened fire, aiming to destroy the airborne robots. One shot struck the conveyor belt's lock. To protect the lock from further damage, a robot leaped onto the belt, knowing it would be destroyed on impact but sacrificing itself without hesitation. Now, only Cleo and the guide remained. The security leader aimed his gun at the guide, mocking it as nothing more than scrap metal. The guide, however, stood firm, unfazed by the insult. Infuriated, the security leader shot the guide in the leg, forcing it to kneel. Even as its body was riddled with bullets, the guide refused to yield. Eventually, the leader approached to finish it off, extracting its chip. Cleo could only watch helplessly, knowing it would be next. At that moment, Jack returned in the car, slamming the accelerator to the floor and ramming into the security team. Two guards narrowly escaped, but Jack shot one dead before being hit by the leader's gunfire. Cornered at the edge of the cliff, Jack faced the leader's taunts. "What makes a man betray his own kind?" The leader sneered. Jack, unfazed, calmly replied, "You don't deserve to be called my kind." Enraged, the leader prepared to fire but felt something behind him. As he turned, the mechanical cockroach leapt onto him, causing him to tumble off the cliff to his death. With the threat eliminated, Jack was finally able to reunite safely with his wife and child. Cleo approached silently, gently brushing her mechanical fingers against the baby's small hand, marking the last moment of peace between their two species. With Jack's help, Cleo crossed the canyon. It carried the guide's legacy, determined to use the abilities humans had bestowed upon them to evolve in this post-apocalyptic wasteland and establish a civilization of their own.